Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
At 1 in the morning, I was elbow deep in our kitchen sink, wrestling with a pipe that had been dripping for 3 weeks. The wrench slipped again, scraping my knuckles raw against the cabinet door. That's when I heard it, my wife's voice drifting through the thin wall, separating our kitchen from her home office. "Oh, you're so bad," Sarah giggled into her phone. It wasn't her business laugh, the polished one she used with clients at the advertising agency. This was different, intimate, the kind of laugh that used to be reserved for me, back when we were young and stupid enough to believe in forever. I'd have to be dead and buried not to recognize that tone. Too bad I'm still breathing. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly through our paper-thin walls. "My husband's working late again. He always is these days." My grip tightened on the wrench until my knuckles went white. 23 years of marriage, and this is what it comes to. Eavesdropping on my own wife like some desperate private investigator. Which, technically, was. Used to be, anyway, back when I worked undercover for the city police. Now I consult for bottom-feeder lawyers and insurance companies, tracking down cheating spouses and fraudulent disability claims. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I love you too," Sarah whispered, and something cold settled in my chest like a block of ice. I set the wrench down carefully, quietly, and listened to the sound of my marriage dying in real time. Sarah's conversation continued for another 10 minutes. Plans for lunch, complaints about her boring husband, promises that made my stomach turn. When she finally hung up, I heard her chair creak and her footsteps heading toward the stairs. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close before I allowed myself to breathe again. The next morning, Sarah was all smiles and coffee kisses, just like always. She wore her navy blue power suit, the one that made her look like she could conquer the world. Maybe she already had, and I was just too stupid to notice. "Don't forget, I have that client dinner tonight," she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Might be late." "Sure thing," I replied, forcing my voice to sound normal. "I'll probably hit the gym with Mick anyway." She kissed my cheek, a quick, distracted peck, and grabbed her purse. "Love you, honey." The words hit me like a slap. "Love you too." After she left, I sat at our kitchen table and stared at the coffee ring stains on the wood surface. 23 years. 2 kids, both grown and moved out. A mortgage we'd finally paid off last year. All of it built on what? Lies? Convenience? The stubborn refusal to admit we'd grown into strangers? My phone buzzed. A text from my old partner, Mick. "Gym tonight? You look like you need to hit something." I typed back, "Definitely." The Southside boxing gym hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd been going there. Same cracked leather heavy bags, same smell of sweat and determination, same crowd of cops, ex-cons, and working stiffs looking to blow off steam. Mick was waiting for me by the speed bag, his gray hair still thick despite pushing 60. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Feel worse." I started wrapping my hands, the familiar ritual giving me something to focus on, besides the churning in my gut. Woman trouble? I glanced around to make sure we weren't being overheard. Old habits. Think Sarah's cheating. Mick didn't look surprised. He'd been a cop for 30 years before retiring, had seen it all. "You sure?" "Heard a phone call last night. All the signs are there." I flexed my fingers, testing the rap. "I've been an idiot." "What are you going to do about it?" That was Mick. Straight to the point. No bullshit sympathy. "It's why we'd been partners for 8 years and friends for longer. I don't know yet." "You want my advice?" He didn't wait for an answer. "You want payback? Make it count. Don't get caught." I spent an hour beating the hell out of a heavy bag, but it didn't help. The anger was still there when I got home, coiled tight in my chest like a snake ready to strike. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. "Client dinner," she'd said. "Right." I went straight to our bedroom and started looking. Not proud of it, but 20 years as a cop teaches you where people hide things. It didn't take long. The burner phone was tucked inside a box of tampons in her bathroom drawer. Clever, but not clever enough. My hands shook as I powered it on and scrolled through the messages. The contact was listed simply as J. The text made me want to throw the phone against the wall. Months of them going back to January. Explicit photos I never wanted to see. plans for hotel meetings, and the worst one dated 3 days ago. Babe, last night you nearly broke the headboard. I'd buy you a new bed if your husband wasn't such a cheap bastard. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where we'd made love, where we'd held our babies, where we'd whispered our dreams to each other in the dark, and felt something fundamental break inside me. But it was the calendar entry that really got me. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Jake's place, all afternoon. Jake, I knew that name. Jake Morrison, Sarah's old colleague from her previous job. Smooth-talking, trust fund baby who'd always made it clear he thought Sarah could do better. Apparently, she agreed. I memorized his address from the GPS history and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I went downstairs, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, and started planning. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent the morning doing reconnaissance. Jake Morrison lived in a lakeside mini-mansion about 20 minutes from our house, the kind of place that screamed new money and bad taste. White columns, circular driveway, fountain in the front yard, the whole 9 yards. His Tesla Model S sat in the driveway like a monument to his success. At 1:45 p.m., I watched from across the street as Sarah's Honda pulled into the driveway. She'd changed clothes since leaving for work that morning. Gone was the conservative business attire, replaced by a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The sight of it made my throat tight. Jake answered the door in a silk bathrobe, like something out of a bad movie. He pulled Sarah into his arms and kissed her right there on the front step, not caring who might see. The arrogance of it made my vision blur with rage. Instead of charging across the street like every instinct screamed at me to do, I forced myself to wait. Patience had always been my strength as a cop. Good things come to those who wait, and revenge is a dish best served cold. And all those other cliches that suddenly felt very real. At 3 a.m., I came back. The neighborhood was dead quiet, streetlights casting long shadows across manicured lawns. I parked 3 blocks away and walked, dressed in dark clothes with a baseball cap pulled low. Old habits from my undercover days, blend in, don't stand out, always have an exit strategy. Jake's Tesla was still in the driveway, gleaming under the porch light like it was posing for a magazine ad. I'd brought a small toolkit from my garage. Nothing fancy, just enough to make my point. I started with the tires, not slashing. Too obvious, too criminal. Instead, I removed the valve stem cores, letting the air out slowly and quietly. While I waited, I opened the hood and got creative. Raw shrimp from the grocery store went into various crevices where they'd rot and stink for weeks. I used a key to carve "liar" into the underside of the hood, where it wouldn't be noticed immediately. For the grand finale, I stuffed the exhaust pipe with steel wool and more shrimp. By the time Jake figured out all the problems, I'd be long gone. I was just closing the hood when a security light flicked on. My heart hammered against my ribs as I heard footsteps on gravel. A security guard rounded the corner of the house, flashlight in hand, looking bored and underpaid. "Hey, you!" he called out. "What are you doing?" I straightened up and put on my best confused expression. "Thank God, somebody who works here," I said in a thick Boston accent I'd perfected during an undercover assignment years ago. "I got a delivery here from Morrison, but nobody's answering the door. Been out here 20 minutes. The guard relaxed slightly but kept his distance. "Delivery, it's 3 in the morning. "Tell me about it. Emergency catering order for some big meeting tomorrow. Rich people, you know. They want what they want when they want it." I gestured toward the house. Guy paid extra for middle-of-the-night delivery, but now he won't answer his door. I'm thinking maybe I should just leave it and go. "What kind of delivery?" I patted the small cooler I'd brought as a prop. "Seafood." "Expensive stuff. Gonna smell real bad if it sits out here much longer." The guard made a face. "Just leave it by the door. I'll make sure he gets it. You're a lifesaver, buddy. Rich people, right?" More money than sense. I walked away whistling, my heart still pounding, but a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. First blood to me. The next morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the paper when Sarah came downstairs. She looked tired, distracted, checking her phone every few seconds. Everything okay? I asked, not looking up from the sports section. Fine, she said quickly. Just work stuff. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it like a lifeline, read the message, and frowned. Problem? No, just a friend having car trouble. She forced a smile. Nothing important. I nodded and went back to my paper, but inside, I was grinning like a wolf. Over the next few days, I watched Sarah's mood deteriorate. She was jumpy, irritable, constantly checking her phone. The burner phone disappeared from the tampon box. She was getting smarter, more careful. But it was too late for careful. I started laying groundwork. Casual conversations at the gym, the bar, the grocery store. Nothing direct, just planting seeds. Sarah's been working late a lot lately, I mentioned to our neighbor Bill, while we were both getting our mail. Hope she's not burning herself out. Women and their careers, Bill replied with a knowing nod. My ex-wife was the same way. Always had some excuse for staying out late. Sarah's not like that, I said, letting just a hint of uncertainty creep into my voice. At least, I hope not. The seed was planted. Bill would remember this conversation, would start noticing things. Small-town gossip mills are more efficient than the internet. I had similar conversations with the guys at the gym, the bartender at Murphy's Pub, even the receptionist at Sarah's office when I stopped by with her forgotten lunch. She's been so stressed lately, I told the receptionist, a gossipy woman named Linda who knew everyone's business. I worry she's taking on too much. Oh, she's been getting a lot of personal calls, Linda said, leaning forward conspiratorially. Very hush-hush. I figured it was maybe a surprise party or something. Maybe, I said, looking troubled. I just hope everything's okay at home. Another seed planted. The beauty of it was that none of it was technically lying. Sarah was working late, she was getting personal calls, she was stressed. I was just letting people draw their own conclusions. 2 weeks after the car incident, Sarah announced she was going to a company gala downtown. Black tie, very important clients. Spouses welcome but not required. You don't mind if I go alone, do you? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes. It'll be mostly work talk. Pretty boring for you. Of course not, I lied. You have fun. I knew Jake would be there. Sarah's old company was co-sponsoring the event, and he'd never miss a chance to schmooze with potential clients. What Sarah didn't know was that I'd already bought a ticket. The Riverside Hotel ballroom was full of advertising executives and local business leaders, all dressed to the nines and pretending to enjoy each other's company. I spotted Sarah immediately. She wore the black dress I'd bought her for Christmas, the one that made her look like a movie star. She was standing near the bar with Jake, laughing at something he'd said. Seeing them together in public, so comfortable and natural, hit me harder than I'd expected. This wasn't just physical. They looked like a couple, like they belonged together. I ordered a bourbon and positioned myself where I could watch without being seen. They were careful not to touch, but the body language was unmistakable. The way she leaned toward him when he spoke. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. 23 years of marriage, and she'd never looked at me like that. I was on my third bourbon when opportunity knocked. The event organizer asked for a few words from the major sponsors. Sarah's boss went first, then Jake stepped up to the microphone. Before I begin, Jake said, his voice carrying across the room, I'd like to propose a toast to honesty and loyalty, the foundation of all good business relationships. The irony was too perfect to resist. I stood up, swaying slightly. The bourbon had done its job. I was drunk enough to be believable, but sober enough to stay in control. Here, here, I called out, raising my glass. To honesty and loyalty. Heads turned. Sarah's face went white when she saw me. Especially in marriage, I continued, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Nothing more important than trust between husband and wife, don't you think? Jake's smile faltered. Of course, he said carefully. My wife's here somewhere, I said, scanning the crowd theatrically. Sarah Peterson. Beautiful woman, works in advertising. Maybe you know her? I think you've had enough to drink, Jake said into the microphone, trying to regain control of the situation. Probably right, I agreed. But you know what they say, in wine, truth, Or in bourbon, in my case. I stumbled slightly, playing up the drunk act. Sarah was moving toward me, her face a mask of mortification. Honey, she said, reaching for my arm, maybe we should go home. Home, I repeated like the word was foreign. Right. Home to our marriage bed, our sacred vows. Till death do us part, right, sweetheart? The crowd was eating it up. Nothing like a little domestic drama to spice up a boring corporate event. Jake stepped down from the podium and walked over, his jaw tight with anger. I think your husband needs some fresh air, he said to Sarah. I think my husband needs to mind his own business, I replied, squaring up to him. And maybe you should mind yours. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned in close enough that only he could hear. It means I know about your performance issues, Jake. Sarah tells me everything. His face flushed red. You're drunk.
He just gave me a massage, that's it!
A massage? With I Miss Your Body after?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Maybe, but I'm not a liar. For a second, I thought he might take a swing at me. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah to deal with the fallout. I'm so sorry, she said to the crowd, her professional smile cracking at the edges. He's been under a lot of stress at work. I let her lead me outside, playing the part of the embarrassed drunk husband. But inside, I was stone-cold sober and calculating my next move. The ride home was silent except for the sound of Sarah's angry breathing. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally exploded. What the hell was that? She screamed. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. Did I? I asked mildly. I thought I was just making conversation. You were drunk. A little, but not drunk enough to forget what I know. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. What are you talking about? Nothing, sweetheart. Just the ramblings of a drunk old fool. But the seed was planted. She knew that I knew, even if she wasn't sure how much. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, while Sarah tossed and turned beside me. My phone buzzed with a text from our daughter, Amelia. Dad, someone posted a video of you at that party on TikTok. It's going viral. What's going on? I smiled in the darkness. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people see the truth. The TikTok video had over 50,000 views by morning. Someone had filmed my entire performance at the gala, complete with dramatic music and captions like, when you find out your wife is cheating and this man is done. The comments section was brutal. Half the people calling me a pathetic drunk, the other half cheering me on as a wronged husband fighting back. Sarah was mortified. She spent the morning fielding calls from colleagues, trying to do damage control. Her boss called twice. Jake called 3 times, but she declined each call. This is a disaster, she said, pacing around our kitchen like a caged animal. My career is ruined. I'm sure it'll blow over, I said, buttering my toast with deliberate calm. People have short attention spans these days. 50,000 people have seen you accuse me of cheating. Did I accuse you of anything? I thought I was just talking about the importance of honesty in marriage. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Who are you? What happened to the man I married? Maybe he got tired of being taken for a fool. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm staying at my sister's tonight, she said. We both need some space to think. Give Victoria my regards, I called after her. Victoria Walsh was Sarah's younger sister and the most toxic person I'd ever met. Divorced 3 times, perpetually in debt, and convinced that the world owed her something. She'd never liked me, thought Sarah had settled when she married a cop, instead of holding out for a doctor or lawyer. The feeling was mutual. If Sarah was running to Victoria, it meant she was desperate. Good. I spent the day making preparations. First stop was the bank, where I liquidated our savings account and transferred the money to a new account in my name only. Perfectly legal. It was joint money, and I had every right to it. The house was in both our names, but I started the paperwork to put it on the market. Next, I visited my lawyer, an old friend from my cop days named Danny Reeves. You look like hell, Tom, he said when I walked into his office. Feel worse. I need to know my options. I laid out the whole story, the affair, the evidence, my plans for revenge. Danny listened without judgment, taking notes on a legal pad. Divorce is your best bet, he said when I finished. With proof of adultery, you'll get a favorable settlement. Maybe keep the house, split the assets 60-40 in your favor. That's not enough. Tom, I get it. You're angry, you want payback, but don't do anything stupid. Don't give her ammunition to use against you. What if I told you I had a way to destroy her reputation, her career, her relationship with her lover, all without breaking any laws? Danny leaned back in his chair. I'd say you're playing with fire, and I'd ask if you're sure you want to go down that road. I'm sure. Then I'd say be very, very careful. And don't tell me the details. What I don't know can't hurt either of us. That afternoon, I drove to Jake's neighborhood and parked where I could watch his house. Sarah's car was in the driveway. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I waited until dark, then made my move. Jake's security was a joke. No cameras on the back of the house, motion sensors that were easy to avoid if you knew how to move. I'd learned a lot about breaking and entering during my undercover days, though I'd never thought I'd use those skills on my wife's lover. The back door was locked, but the window to his home office was cracked open. I slipped inside, quiet as a ghost. The house was exactly what I'd expected, all flash and no substance. Expensive furniture that looked like it came from a catalog, abstract art that probably cost more than my car, a wine collection that screamed, "Look how sophisticated I am." I could hear voices upstairs, Sarah's laugh, Jake's deeper rumble. The sound made my stomach clench, but I pushed the emotion aside. Emotion was the enemy now. I needed to be cold, calculating, professional. I found what I was looking for in Jake's bedroom dresser. Silk ties, expensive ones that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. Perfect for what I had in mind. I also found something even better. A collection of sex toys that would make a porn star blush, complete with instructional videos and a leather-bound journal detailing Jake's various kinks and fantasies. The man had expensive tastes and no shame. When Sarah and Jake came downstairs an hour later, I was waiting in the living room. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, standing up from Jake's leather recliner. "Jake!" Sarah screamed. Jake went for his phone, but I was faster. 20 years of police work had kept me in shape. "Relax," I said, holding up my hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to talk." "Get out of my house," Jake said, trying to sound tough. Hard to pull off when you're wearing nothing but a silk bathrobe. "In a minute. First, we're going to have a little conversation about respect and consequences." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Jake Morrison, you've been having an affair with my wife Sarah Peterson for approximately 8 months. Is that correct?" "I'm calling the police," Jake said, reaching for his phone again. "Go ahead. Tell them how you've been screwing another man's wife in your fancy house. I'm sure the local news would love that story." He stopped reaching for the phone. "Now, Jake, I found some interesting items in your bedroom. Want to tell Sarah about your collection? Or should I show her the videos?" Jake's face went white. "You can't what? Can't expose you for the perverted piece of garbage you are? Can't let the whole world know what kind of man my wife left me for?" I turned to Sarah, who was standing frozen by the staircase. "Did you know about his little hobby, sweetheart? The toys, the videos, the detailed journal of his sexual fantasies. Some real sick stuff in there." "Tom, please," Sarah whispered. "No, don't do this." "Do what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you wanted? Honesty in our marriage?" I pulled out Jake's silk ties and started binding his hands to the chair. He didn't resist. He was too shocked, too humiliated to fight back. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and professional. "I'm going to stage a little scene here. Nothing violent, nothing illegal. Just embarrassing enough to ruin both your reputations when the photos hit social media." "You're insane," Jake said. "Maybe, but I'm not a cheater." I spent the next 20 minutes arranging the scene, Jake tied to the chair with his own expensive ties, surrounded by his collection of sex toys, Sarah's panties draped over his head like a trophy. I took dozens of photos from every angle, making sure to capture Jake's face clearly in each one. "Smile, Jake," I said, snapping another picture. "This is going to be your Christmas card this year." When I was satisfied with my work, I called 911. I'd like to report a medical emergency, I said in a disguised voice. Man tied up at 1247 Lakeshore Drive. Looks like some kind of kinky sex game gone wrong. Better send an ambulance. I hung up and looked at my handiwork. Jake was crying now, big tears rolling down his cheeks. Sarah was curled up in the corner, her face buried in her hands. The ambulance will be here in about 10 minutes, I said. Plenty of time for the neighbors to come out and see the show. I'm sure someone will call the local news. Please, Jake begged. I'll end it with Sarah. I'll never see her again. Just don't send those photos. Too late for that, Jake. You should have thought about consequences before you decided to screw another man's wife. I headed for the back door, then stopped and turned around. Oh, and Jake, if I ever see you near my wife again, these photos will be the least of your problems. I know people, bad people who don't like cheaters any more than I do. I left them there and walked back to my car, sirens wailing in the distance. The story hit the local news the next morning. Local business executive found in compromising position was the headline, complete with a pixelated photo of Jake tied to his chair. The reporter described it as a bizarre incident involving a prominent member of the business community and hinted at salacious details that couldn't be broadcast. I watched the coverage from a dingy motel room across town, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup and feeling more satisfied than I had in months. The Sunset Motor Lodge wasn't much to look at. Faded carpet, water stains on the ceiling, the lingering smell of cigarettes and desperation. But it was perfect for my needs. Cash only, no questions asked, and the kind of place where people minded their own business. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Calls from Sarah, from Victoria, from my kids asking what the hell was going on. I ignored them all. The only call I answered was from Mick. Jesus Christ, Tom, he said when I picked up. What did you do? What needed to be done? The whole town's talking about it. Jake Morrison's a laughingstock. His business partners are already distancing themselves. Good. And Sarah? What about her? She called me looking for you. Says you've lost your mind, that she's scared of what you might do next. She should be scared. There was a long pause. Tom, I know you're hurting, but maybe it's time to step back. Let the lawyers handle things. I'm just getting started. I hung up and went back to planning. The motel room was set up like a command center. Photos of Jake and Sarah spread across the bed, copies of bank statements and legal documents, a detailed timeline of their affair. I'd used my old undercover skills to create a new identity, complete with fake ID and credit cards. As far as the world knew, Tom Peterson had disappeared. But I was still here, watching, waiting, planning my next move. Sarah had moved in with Victoria temporarily, according to my surveillance. Victoria lived in a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of town, the kind of place where the parking lot was more pothole than pavement, and the neighbors pretended not to hear the domestic disputes through thin walls. I knew Victoria's routine. She worked part-time at a nail salon, spent her afternoons at Murphy's Pub, and was usually passed out drunk by 10 p.m. She was also deeply in debt, behind on her rent, and desperate for money. The perfect weak link. On Wednesday evening, I waited for Victoria outside Murphy's Pub. She stumbled out at closing time, alone and drunk as usual. Victoria, I called from the shadows. She spun around, nearly losing her balance. Tom, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Sarah said you've gone crazy. She's scared of you. Sarah should worry about her own problems, like her career, her reputation, her future. Victoria squinted at me in the dim light from the neon beer signs. What do you want? Information about Jake, about their affair, about how long you've known. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Victoria. You've never been good at it. She tried to walk away, but I stepped in front of her. I know you set them up. You introduced them at that Christmas party 2 years ago. You encouraged Sarah to pursue him. This whole thing has your fingerprints all over it. You're paranoid. Am I? Or am I just finally seeing clearly? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. Victoria and Jake having coffee together 3 months ago, deep in conversation. I'd found it on Jake's social media, buried in his tagged photos. Interesting lunch date, I said. What were you two discussing? How to destroy my marriage. How much money Jake would pay you for delivering my wife. Victoria's face went pale. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She looked around nervously as if checking for witnesses. Can we go somewhere private? My car. We'll take a little drive. We drove in silence to the old industrial district, where abandoned warehouses lined the river like broken teeth. I parked in an empty lot and turned off the engine. Talk, I said. Victoria lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Jake approached me first, said he'd always had feelings for Sarah, wanted to know if she was happy in her marriage. And you told him what? The truth. That you two had grown apart, that Sarah felt trapped, unappreciated. So you decided to help him steal my wife. I wanted Sarah to be happy. You wanted money. How much did he pay you? Victoria took a long drag from her cigarette. 5,000. To arrange meetings, provide alibis, keep you distracted. The number hit me like a physical blow. My marriage had been sold for $5,000. There's more, Victoria said quietly. What more? Jake's married. His wife lives in California, thinks he's here on extended business. He was never going to leave her for Sarah. He was just using her. The betrayal was complete now. Sarah had thrown away 23 years of marriage for a man who saw her as a temporary diversion. Why are you telling me this? Because I feel guilty, okay? Because I see what it's done to you, to Sarah, to the kids. Because Jake cut me off after that night at his house, said I was a liability.